Metal aestheticism has kind of just gone out to pasture. Metal might have had a lot of different looks over the years, but someone took that bitch out back and shot it between the eyes. It's been difficult to pigeonhole and pin down where exactly metal aestheticism has really been throughout the years, because it's always sort of meant something different depending on who you're talking to or what genre you're in. There was a time in like the early days of metal where your association with it was going to be like biker type dudes, the Rob Halfords and Lemmys of the world, or Ozzy Osbourne coming out all leather clad, which infinitely inspired a ton of people that were into hard rock at the time and early heavy metal music, and this would sort of permeate into the 1980s when there was going to be a whole different wave of glam metal, which obviously tested the limits of like 80s aestheticism, sort of mixing in with that, showing men being a little bit more flamboyant, leotards and stuff, but this can also sort of be chalked up to artists like David Bowie and Prince and Freddie Mercury doing a lot for that. Death metal has its own associations of battle vests, although that can also be considered a thrash metal thing. Black metal definitely has the corpse paint and the chain link wrist guards and chokers and that sort of shit. And then scene culture was its own beautiful train wreck. Metalcore itself definitely has a lot of aesthetics that you could associate with it. But as George Carlin once said, no one notified me of a change throughout the years. It just happened steadily, slowly but surely, and no one really knew. But God, am I stupid for noticing that metal has sort of become a melting pot in a way that it never really has been? Don't get me wrong, I don't think metal necessarily has a generalized look. It's more so a generalization than anything else. But I go to a decent amount of metal shows. I've been to a lot of different metal shows from a lot of different genres, everything from very underground death metal shows to very mainstream metalcore shows, thrash metal and heavy metal and everything in between. And it does seem like there has sort of been this like overarching change. People sort of blur the lines and blend in, and the things that you would usually associate with like death metal or black metal or bleeding into metalcore shows, and you go to an underground death metal show and there's people that look like they're straight out of a 2011 scene metalcore band. I think this is beautiful. I think it should be encouraged more, because I think that people should be able to express their fashion in whatever way they see fit, and especially if they're in the metal world, do whatever the fuck you want, have fun with it if you like a certain band or a certain style. But there are very few things that are as strong as dictating the culture and the tempo of a specific community than the fashion of it. Fashion always speaks volumes to how people present themselves, how they want to be perceived in the world, and that carries over to music, definitely. Not just metal, not just rock, every single subgenre of music ever. They all slowly but surely acquire these things that are stylistically integral to the general vibe of their genre. It becomes sort of this community statement, and if you know type of thing, either through color, either through look, either through design. And metal is definitely no stranger to that. Like I said at the start of the video, I could pretty much go through every single major metal subgenre and say, you know, there are a lot of people that look like this specific type of thing. And it's never good to just label or box people into corners and say that everyone who listens to this specific type of music looks like this. And I've even done videos before saying that metal doesn't necessarily just have a look. But there are consistencies, is what I will say. Consistencies in the sense that you can usually pick someone out and say, yeah, they probably lean more towards that side of the metal world, but it's become so much more of a cultural melting pot, and it's made me wonder if throughout the decades, metal has just become a community as a whole, and even if people will push others away if you are more of like an elitist or if you don't really agree with a specific subgenre. But generally speaking, I would like to think that most metalheads are pretty open-minded and don't really care what you look like if you like metal. That's the whole point. And speaking from experience, I know that on this channel I have dealt a lot with regularly, and I still do, people commenting about my appearance or talking about how I look in any given video. And there's obviously always going to be people who conflate your validity as a metalhead with what you look like or what you sound like, your background, but generally speaking, 9 times out of 10, people are going to be very respectful and kind and don't necessarily care about that shit. We're all a bunch of fish swimming in the same bowl on this rock flying through space, and there are very much deeper things to worry about than that. But I think that metal as an aesthetic has kind of died out a little bit, but not necessarily in the way that you might think. All of the individual aesthetics aesthetics and styles that make metal fashion so cool and admirable and honorable and look really cool and badass depending on what scene you're talking about, and really shows that sort of freedom and how you express yourself, kind of going against the grain, because a lot of metal stuff definitely is pretty alternative and counterculture, especially if you go into some of the more underground things. All of those things individually, they still very much exist, and if you go to any metal show, you're going to see them alive and well. But that's the very reason I made this video. Individually, they seemingly all came together, and as opposed to being these just individual factions that constitute different subgenres, it seems to be more of a collective fashion thing where you understand that everyone is just as valid from a fashion standpoint when it comes to metal and rock and alternative culture in general, and I think that is awesome. I genuinely don't know when that turning point was, because I remember a time in my life as a metalhead where it was very individualistic. A lot of like the new metal era had people that were going against the grain of metal entirely, and they were being disavowed from it. People were saying they were posers, not real metalheads. In the metalcore and scene era of the late 2000s and early 2010s, it's not like it was that damn long ago. A decade and a half ago at the absolute most, it was a culture war in the metal community. So where exactly was the turning point where people stopped caring about what you were dressing like or what you looked like in general and just welcomed you into the community no matter what, because it was all just collectively metal? Just a decade or a decade and a half ago, people were being very judgmental and questioning if someone was even a metalhead based on the way that they dressed or the music that they listened to. And those two things, obviously, they can't be understated, and they go hand in hand a little bit, especially if you're talking about some of the lesser liked metal genres, or the ones that have a little bit more discussion and controversy around them, a little bit more polarizing. But at the core of it, there definitely was sort of this thing of pansies and posers, and if you didn't look the part and if you didn't act the part, then you were automatically called into question and persecuted for not fitting that criteria of what people had in their head of being a metalhead. And it's funny because if you go up to someone that knows nothing about metal, knows like the bare minimum, and just ask them, what does a metalhead look like? Chances are they're going to have something in their head, and it's maybe going to be a little bit of a generalization or a stereotype. It might be a little tropish and cliche, but they're going to have some sort of standard that they got from somewhere, and chances are it's gonna be one of those individualistic styles that came about decades and decades ago. So where exactly did it go for that generalization to fade and vanish into the backdrop a little bit, being replaced with more of a collectivism when it comes to the metal community in the fashion department? Just some food for thought. I would love to hear your guys' opinions on this. You can let me know down in the comment section below. Agree or disagree, there is no wrong answer. Be sure to like this video if you enjoyed it, subscribe to join the review family today, and smash that notification bell to be notified of my future uploads. You know who it is. My name is Jay Morris, and I'm signing off saying farewell.